Let me keep moving a little bit that way, guys, because we got a lot of people. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. We'll take questions after all the members have spoken. Dusty Johnson from South Dakota, and for 150 years, the Supreme Court has had 9 justices. It's a number that has worked pretty well. It's a number that justices who have served on the court have said that is the right number to make the court effective, small enough to allow them to be deliberative and large enough for them to be able to represent some diversity of views. Unfortunately, in recent years, a legitimate threat has arisen to pack the court. You've had Democratic leadership, including no less than the chairman, a former chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, that has introduced legislation to add 4 more justices to this Supreme Court. This is a terrible idea. I think we all understand that in Washington, D.C., we weaponize everything. One thing that still has some semblance of independence from the ups and downs of daily politics is the federal judiciary. That's why Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, and others have said time and time again that packing the court will undermine public confidence in the judiciary. They don't want, I don't want, we don't want the size of this Supreme Court to ping-pong up and down just on the basis of the most recent federal election. We need to keep the 9, and I think you will see over the course of the next weeks and months that an incredible cross-section of the Republican conference, from the center right to the far right, understand the importance of keeping the 9. With that, I'm proud to be able to introduce the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pete Sessions.
Dusty, thank you very much. Today is a very important opportunity for not just the Republican conference, but for all Americans to understand that there is a conscious effort underway by the Democratic Party that would substantially change the powers of this country. Today, we have the 3 branches of government that the Democratic Party is trying to overrun in all 3 opportunities. First of all, by H.R. 1, their bill last year, that would keep in place an opportunity for them to control through the executive branch all elections that would take place in this country. What they are now trying to do is to weaponize the Supreme Court and the court system. My father served as a federal judge for 14 years. During that period of time, he understood his duty and obligation to the laws of the United States of America, and that is what judges are there to serve and rule on. The laws of the country, not the political say of the executive branch or the legislative branch. So today what we are here to do is to let the American people know that there are people like Dusty Johnson and others who do recognize the importance of this country, not just the Constitution, but the balance of 3 distinct branches of government that are important. I'm delighted to introduce the young Congresswoman from Iowa, Congresswoman Hinson, who will then talk about her perspective from Iowa. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman from Texas and the gentleman from South Dakota for bringing us all together. Our founding fathers set up a system of checks and balances, and that was designed to ensure that the government would continue to be accountable to the people. And these checks and balances are enshrined in our Constitution. And why did they do this? They did it because they foresaw the dangers coming down the road, the dangers of a power-hungry, ever-growing bureaucracy. And that is why our founding fathers intentionally created an independent Supreme Court to help protect Iowans and all Americans from the federal government, from the overreach, and from that encroachment on our rights. The Supreme Court does not exist to do partisan bidding. Our 9 justices are entrusted to interpret the Constitution strictly and to rein in abuses of power. But again, we are hearing these increased calls from those on the left. They want to pack the court with justices that will be activists, justices that will try to legislate from the bench. They will undermine this sacred institution. and they will also undermine our Constitution. Our Supreme Court has remained 9 for over 150 years, and it is time we solidify this number, make it our law, and protect the independence of our highest court. The Supreme Court must stay at 9 justices. Adopting the Keep the 9 Amendment will send a very powerful and important message at an important time. We want our judiciary to remain independent. We value our liberties in this country, and we will always safeguard our Constitution. And now it's my honor to introduce the gentleman from Florida, Representative Greg Steube.
Thanks, Ashley. When Democrats lose, they try to change the rules. So when they had single power in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House, there were calls to change the makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court because it was the only backstop to their horrible, unconstitutional policies in this country. So what's their solution to that problem? Let's pack the court. You heard calls after calls. Jerry Nadler and others stood in front of the U.S. Supreme Court and calls to expand and pack the court because their unconstitutional things that they tried to do in this country were being thwarted by a constitutional court. We stand up here today together to keep the 9. And that's what the Republican conference is going to sit together and fight for, because we believe in the history of this country. We believe that you shouldn't use political weaponization to try to change the outcome of the court for political purposes. They need to remain separate, and we should keep the 9, and I stand with my colleagues to do that. Now I introduce Representative Moran from Texas.
As a former Texas judge, I understand the importance of an impartial and neutral judiciary, one that is protected from the political whims of either party. Today, more than ever, the principles affirmed by Marbury versus Madison are critical to the survival of our republic and the preservation of our Constitution. The need for a clear separation of powers and the need for independent judicial review. For over 150 years, the Supreme Court has been composed of 9 justices nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate, working to defend and uphold our Constitution through that independent and impartial judicial review. This numeric stability of these 9 justices has been and remains a critical component to its neutrality. Without action to set in stone the composition of the Supreme Court, that institution will in time become nothing more than the political extension of the other branches of government. Without this amendment, this nation faces the real possibility of political attempts to pack the court, which would undermine the mission of the Supreme Court and erode the very independence that is the primary source of its integrity. We cannot let this happen. I'm proud to stand with Dusty Johnson and my other colleagues to support this constitutional amendment that will keep the Supreme Court bench at 9 justices for as long as this republic stands. Thank you. Now I introduce the Congresswoman from Oklahoma, Stephanie Bice.
Thank you, Representative Moran, and I want to thank Dusty Johnson for the opportunity to bring us together today. The Democrats' attempt to pack the court threatens the foundational values of our great nation. Since 1869, there have been 9 justices on the Supreme Court. Until recently, politicians like President Joe Biden opposed packing the court because it would completely uproot our institutions. As was mentioned, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, and I quote, "I think that was a bad idea when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to pack the court." She also stated, 9 seems to be a good number, and it's been that way for a very long time. This should not be a partisan issue. However, it's no coincidence that Democrats have pushed to add justices, especially as recent court decisions haven't gone their way. But this is not how democracy works, and this is not how America works. Regardless of political stance, Americans should have basic trust in our historic institutions. That is why I am proud to support my friend Representative Dusty Johnson in this resolution to keep the 9. It is essential that we protect the integrity of the Supreme Court and keep it away from political power grabs. Thank you, and it is my honor to introduce my friend and classmate Jerry Carl from Alabama.
Good morning. I appreciate the press corps showing up this morning. You know, the last 2 years I've been here, there's not much, very few things here that are stable. But our Supreme Court has always been stable. For the last 150 years, whether you agree or disagree with their rulings, they have stayed stable. Now we're at a situation that we feel like the Democrat Party is attacking the Supreme Court. We have got to get an upper hand on this. We, the people, the voters, have got to step out and make noise and let their legislators know in the Senate and the House how they feel about this. Packing these courts is wrong. It has worked for 150 years. Let's keep it the way it is. Let's put the best, brightest minds we can get on the bench, and let's keep at least one thing stable here in Washington, D.C. With that said, I would like to introduce my good friend from South Carolina, Representative Rusty Fry.
Democrats' efforts to pack the Supreme Court is unprecedented and dangerous. Last year, I was proud to be the lead sponsor of the Keep the Nine resolution in the state of South Carolina General Assembly, and I'm proud to stand here today. You know, for 150 years, our Supreme Court has stood the test of time. It has been a beacon for our country, a stabilizing force. The attempt to change the court now is only a power grab, and we need to recognize it for what it is. So I'm proud to be part of this great collaboration of congressmen and women, and I think that it is very important that we keep our institutions sacred, that we honor our founding fathers by keeping the court exactly where it is, at 9 justices on the Supreme Court. Thank you. And at this time, I'd welcome Mr. Glenn Grothman.
When I was a child and we went to school to learn about American history, it was the good old days. You almost couldn't remember anything bad ever being said about this country or about our presidents. I think there was a little bit of negativity about Warren Harding because he had some crooks under him. A little bit of a bad feeling about James Buchanan because the Civil War started on his watch and there was a feeling that he should have been doing something different. But the one thing I remember, even with my moderate history textbooks from when I was a child, is that Franklin Roosevelt did something horrible when he tried to pack the court. Every school child knew that. Now, last session, there were efforts made to get around the Constitution by adding, I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 toadies to the Supreme Court who didn't respect our wonderful Constitution. And that's why, sadly, a bill has to be introduced today to try to permanently thwart any presidents in the future. And actually, as I understand it in the past, this effort was killed by even Joe Biden, because he was maybe a little older than me even, and he knew that Franklin Roosevelt had done something awful by trying to pack the Supreme Court. So this is a good thing to prevent any future presidents who don't respect our Constitution from trying to add additional people to the Supreme Court, who, by the way, should not be loyal to any individual president or political party. They should have a deep, abiding loyalty to the Constitution of the United States. So I'm proud to be on this bill, and now we want to introduce one of our new rising stars, the freshman from Wyoming, Harriet. It's the first time I've ever seen her name. Said her name. She's so new up here. How do you say your name?
Hageman.
Harriet Hageman.
What an introduction. Thank you, and it's wonderful to be here today. The government created by our founders and enshrined in our Constitution established 3 co-equal branches of government. Now, because the Democrats have been unsuccessful in pushing their radical agenda through the legislative branch, they want to pack the courts with liberal judges and justices and push their agenda through that way. The Supreme Court has been at 9 members since 1869. And as a co-equal branch, it should not be able to be manipulated by either of the other 2 branches. Because many of our Democrat politicians have called for court packing, it is necessary for us to take this step to enshrine in our Constitution the 9 justices that currently serve. In the 117th Congress, 80% of all Republican members supported the bill, but there was no one on the Democrat side willing to step forward and put their name on it, despite many of them saying that they actually favor exactly what we're doing today. The amendment being sought with this legislation is a simple 13 words. Unlike the monstrous spending bills Congress routinely passes, it is very simple and direct. Quote, the Supreme Court of the United States shall be composed of 9 justices. Polling shows that voters support keep the 9 Amendment by a 3-to-1 margin. And 19 state legislatures have also supported this amendment, along with many other organizations. This means that it is an amendment that could actually be adopted, implemented, and enforced. Can you imagine the excitement of actually amending our Constitution for something positive like this? Amending the Constitution is rare and purposely requires great effort. This is an effort worth making, and I'm proud to stand with my colleagues and support the Keep 9 Amendment. And now I am honored to introduce Ralph Norman. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. Congressman Johnson and all of you, I'm proud to stand here today to really stop something that the Senate is trying to do, which is to change the Supreme Court that, as has been mentioned, has been over 150 years. You know, a lot of things come through Congress. A lot of them are not right, like the invasion at the border, like the lawlessness. But what the Democrats are trying to do now in the Senate, to change the Supreme Court, to pack the Supreme Court, shakes the very foundation that our country was founded on, and it destroys the Constitution. To have to do this is really amazing. But what we're going to do is stand firm, and as Harriet mentioned, this is a very simple amendment that we can all get behind. And our message to the Senate, there's a time to be quiet on certain things. Now is the time to fight. We're going to ring the bells for freedom, and we're going to ring the bells to stop this onslaught of our Constitution. And I'm so proud that we're doing this now. And if the Senate, they can do what they want to do, but not on this. A lot of things are bad. We're going to stop this dead in its tracks. It's my honor to introduce Mike Garcia to speak next.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I want to thank Dusty for this actually very important amendment. You know, as human beings, we have this instinctual desire to win, to get what we want. As kids, when we lost, we would ask for a do-over. If we didn't get what we want, we would cry, that's not fair. And that's really all this desire to pack the courts is. This is a continuation of wanting to do things to change the rules so that the Democrats can actually succeed with their agenda. This is akin to wanting to end the filibuster in the Senate because they can't pass bills there. This is the same thing as wanting to make D.C. a state to try to fortify their majority. This is the same as trying to federalize election laws because they're fearful of losing the majority in both chambers. And it's effectively the same thing as changing the definition of recession so that you don't have to admit that you are in a recession, or saying that the border is secure when we all know it is in fact not. So this amendment will allow us to stay true to the values and the principles of this country, to a formula that has worked with 9 justices on the Supreme Court. And we have to resist this temptation to change the rules simply because we don't like the outcomes of some of the rulings in the Supreme Court. That's true for both parties. And if we lose a baseball game at the end of 9 innings, we don't add innings. We don't add more than 9 innings to a baseball game. We should not be adding more than 9 justices to the Supreme Court. I now have the honor of introducing the powerhouse of Texas, Ms. Beth Van Dyne.
Last Congress, we saw a Democrat-led administration attempt to add more members to the Supreme Court because they didn't like the decisions that were coming out of the more than majority of Republican justices that were on the bench. We had a Democrat Party that had control of the presidency, the House of Representatives, and the Senate, and yet it wasn't enough. This was all about control. This was all about extending their control beyond the time that they would be in office to the extent that they can control the Supreme Court. When they didn't like the outcome, they were going to change the rules. When we saw the court packing case with President Roosevelt, he attempted to manipulate members of Congress to support it. Hatton Sumner was approached and told that he would get a spot on the court if he agreed and helped to push through and whip the votes necessary. Instead of doing that, which would have been good for him personally, he recognized the value of having a Supreme Court that was separate from the political system, the value of maintaining the history of the U.S. and the basic principles and foundations. And instead of going along to get along, He stood up, he fought it, and he was successful. We need to have more people like that, backbones on both sides of our aisles. It would be wonderful to have our Democrat colleagues up here right now. This past year, we saw threats made not only to our justices, but to their families at their homes, to try to persuade, push, threaten them to make different views and different decisions on their court cases. That is a travesty to our republic. We need to stand up, have principle, and recognize it's the foundation of our history. With that, I'd like to introduce Congressman Huizenga from the great state of Michigan.
Well, nearly everything's been said by nearly everybody, so I'll summarize real briefly. But I hope you understand that what you are seeing here is a representation of our conference. And Glenn Grothman told FDR not to do it. I think he's going to tell Joe Biden not to do it as well. But in all seriousness, this is something that has unified and united our conference. The fact that we realize when Democrats can't get done what they would like to do legislatively, they turn to the courts. Well, guess what? The courts haven't been going in their favor in the last little bit. So now they want to expand the playing field. Well, we know it's wrong. The American people know it's wrong. In fact, it's interesting. The loudest voices for this are coming out of the House, the people's house. But what do the people say? They know in their DNA that this is the wrong thing to do. So they're standing up against that. And let me let you in on a little dirty secret. There's a lot of Democrats that actually agree with us, right? We all have those relationships that we talk to these folks. And they know in their hearts as well that this is the wrong direction to go, but that the onslaught from the progressive left is something that has kept them away from addressing this issue. I'm hoping that the Republican majority is going to be able to give them some cover for them to come forward and be able to really, truly express what they know is the right thing, which is to keep that number at 9 and to keep our system stable. So with that, I think we're ready to take a few questions, right, Dusty?
We're going to go to Congressman Mike Flood.
Oh, sorry,
We'll
Mike Flood.
To, Congressman Issa, and then Custer.
One of the most famous members to ever serve in Congress, both in the House and the Senate, was George W. Norris from Nebraska. He served alongside FDR, and in that time he said, quote, "The people can change Congress, but only God can change the Supreme Court." That was the sentiment of Congress over 100 years ago, and it remains a sentiment today. I stand strong. I want to thank Dusty Johnson for having us here today, our neighbor to the north in South Dakota. It's really sad that we even have to do this. If you think about where America's at, that somebody would consider packing the court to get the outcomes that they want. I don't want to say any more than that because I think there's still speakers to go, but I appreciate being part of this and look forward to this passing. Thanks.
I guess we are at that point where everything has been said, but not by everyone. Before I introduce the gentleman from Tennessee, I think I just want to share with you a little background that you may not have yet heard or seen. In the last Congress, I served as the ranking member on the Courts Committee, ultimately where a bill of this sort would go through. And my ranking member, my chairman, was Hank Johnson. And I'm not going to use any things about the things that he has said previously, but in this case, speaking about the court as he introduced a bill to add 200 judges all at once, he said, well, Trump packed the court, it's our turn. That was even separate from the effort to add to the Supreme Court. As was said earlier, there is a reason to look at the size of a court. There is a reason for Congress to look at it, but there is no reason to do it simply because we don't like a ruling. I don't like the Ninth Circuit, but it doesn't change the fact that those judges over time change based on presidents and the Senate. The same needs to be true of this Supreme Court. So as I look forward to potentially having Hank Johnson as my ranking member and Jerry Conley as ranking on the full committee, I can't forget that they didn't just want to pack not more than 9 at the Supreme Court. They wanted to add basically 25% overnight to the district and appellate courts so they could get what they wanted to get. That's wrong. It would be wrong for Republicans. It remains wrong for the other party. And with that, the last, and definitely you're going to wrap this up, right? The gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Eisen. Thank you, Congressman Johnson, for bringing us all together today. I think that I'm the last Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney in the House of Representatives. And the thing that we all know, we all like rules, we all like procedures, and we like precedent. And what we've seen over the last 2 years when Democrats threaten to disrupt that is that the rules are the rules until the rules aren't convenient. And that's when they talked about packing the court. I think Glenn Grothman said it exactly right when he talked about our nation's history. When we hear from our constituents, they like our principles, they like the precedents. And the precedence is, historically, to keep the court, to keep the United States Supreme Court at 9 justices. We hear this message from our constituents, the Democrat members do too. We need to keep that precedence. We need to keep the court at 9 members. And this bill does exactly that, and we need to continue to send that message all across the nation. Thank you all for being here, Mr. Johnson. I'll yield it back to you.
Obviously, we've got a lot of members, so we're happy to take questions, and we'll sort of toss them to whoever wants them. Who's up? Yes.
Jayapal, they were trying to add, I think it was 4 members to the court. They had an argument, and I'm sure you've heard it, that the number of justices has changed 6 times since it was a founding of our country. What is your response to that, and why do you think, and particularly to progressives who argue that Republicans are only trying to do this now to solidify the conservative lean in the court?
I mean, let's keep in mind that Republicans have never tried to pack the court. I mean, Ms. Jayapal can go back to precedents from 170 and 190 years ago, but the reality is that every single human being who has served on this court in recent history has, to the extent that they've spoken about this publicly, has said that packing the court is the wrong idea. With all due respect to Ms. Jayapal and the other progressives who are trying to pack the court, their push is exactly as these members have said, it is a power grab. They don't have a report from an independent third party that says, the court would function better with 13 members. They have absolutely no independent analysis that indicates a number other than 9 would be better. This is about a power grab. It is transparent. It is wrong. And this group of members will stand against it. Somebody else?
Then why do you think it changed 6 times in the past? Just curious. Was it to function better, or what was that?
Let's keep in mind, in the earliest days of this country, of course there was going to be a learning process. Of course, we were trying to figure out what it looked like to be a big boy, a big girl United States of America. But once we caught our stride on that, once we decided that 9 was the right number of justices, it has stayed there for 154 years. And I think there's a very important reason for that, and every member of the Supreme Court who's spoken about this publicly agrees with me and disagrees with Ms. Jayapal. And I'm going to quit answering questions, so others have got to pop in.
I'd like to answer it from a technical standpoint. I said in my little short statement that, in fact, we can have that consideration. We have had that consideration over these last 150 years an amazing amount of times. That's the reason that we have all of our circuits. When our country was young and George Washington got to pick 7 Supreme Court justices all by himself, and then several of them quit during his 8 years and he had to pick more. So he picked more than any other president will ever get to pick. He literally packed the court by definition. At that time, those justices also sat down like district judges and heard cases. They called it riding circuit. They were essentially the district court, the appellate court, and the Supreme Court. As we evolved and created district courts and appellate courts, we did so to take the workload and the decision process and the appeal process and put it out there of something like 80 Supreme Court justices. The difference is their at the 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th circuits. They are there making those decisions. It's the reason that we have functioned very well with 9 justices for more than a century, is that in fact we made a decision and the justices participated. They don't ride circuit anymore. They, in fact, do the opposite. District judges sit on the appellate court from time to time. And so, as Dusty said, every justice, and for that matter, judges of all stripes, who have looked at this have said, we helped, with Congress's acquiescence, create a system that works extremely well, and it's not about the Supreme Court. It's about 700 judges, not including all the other Article I judges. So when we look at the court system, I'm happy to have a discussion, and we had a bill in the last Congress that would, over time, increase by 70 judges at the district and the appellate court. That came from a conference that the Chief Justice sits on. He did not ask for more people at the Supreme Court. He did ask, and we offered on a bipartisan, bicameral basis, a change in the court where it needs to happen, and to do it over time so that no one Congress and no one president would automatically increase by 70 or 10% of the court. So the people who say they have that, as Dusty said, the problem is they don't have any technical basis for it, and they don't have any historic basis. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's changed 6 times. It's actually changed dozens and dozens of times into the system it is today, which functions very well, with the exception that they're a little bit too busy and the caseloads have backed up. But they haven't backed up at the Supreme Court. They've backed up at the district court. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Recent polling shows that the American public's trust in the court is at an all-time low. Do you think passing, a partisan bill supported by Republicans that many argue is to cement a status quo that's favorable to conservatives, do you think that that hurts the perception of the court as not being balanced?
Go ahead. Let's flip the coin. Is packing the court with one president on a partisan basis with a partisan Senate going to turn that sentiment around? I don't think so. There is a lot of distrust in various levels of government, local, state, federal, as well as our courts. We've seen this with the attacks on the police and law enforcement. So there's a lot of doubt and mistrust. I just don't see how gaming the system and changing it to pack it with, as Darrell was rightly noting, history's inconvenient sometimes, right? And it's inconvenient for them when they're trying to make this argument. And so I would ask the question, if we flip that equation around, how in the world are we packing the Supreme Court on a partisan basis somehow going to magically turn that sentiment around? I just don't see that.
Anyone else? Okay, questions?
We were busy on January 3rd, 4th, 5th. Had other things going on.
But in fairness, we were having this discussion in the minority, right? I mean, this isn't a new issue for us. I mean, we were having this discussion 2 years ago when the House of Representatives was in the minority and the Senate was at 50-50. I mean, there was a lot of discussions about that as the new Biden administration was coming in and looking at what had happened with the Trump nominations and the Trump confirmations, and they were very uncomfortable with it because they started seeing a Supreme Court, I would argue, finally returning back to its constitutional roots. And so now this is not a new effort, but it's going to get some volume. It's going to get some emphasis with us in the majority, and hopefully the Senate will be paying close attention to it. I do believe that they are. Again, as I've said, we all have Democrat friends on the other side of the aisle who kind of quietly will go, yeah, this is not a good idea. Because they understand that worm turns at some point politically. And you look at what happened in the Senate with the nuclear option on filibuster discussions. You look at what they've done at various levels, and we're seeing some of that happening here in the House of Representatives now. Precedents that Speaker Pelosi had set is now coming back, and they have to live under the same rules and expectations that they created in the last 4 years.
Harriet and Beth, you both are stepping forward. Let's go Harriet, then Beth.
Just very quickly, this isn't. I actually have practiced before the United States Supreme Court quite extensively. I've been an attorney for almost 34 years. This isn't something new. The state legislators have been taking this up for several years now. So the fact that we are also pursuing it at the federal level doesn't mean that this is a new idea. As I indicated in my remarks, there's over 19 state legislators that have already adopted a keep the nine type of approach. So it's not anything new. It's just something that we're addressing at this point because it's the Democrats who are talking about packing the court.
Well, and I wanted to make sure that that was clear. When you say why now, why time, we're not bringing this fight up. We're not saying that this is out of nowhere. This is in direct response to the attack that the Democrats are saying by forming a committee to pack the court by more than 4 members, simply to allow Joe Biden an opportunity to pack the court with 4 very progressive members of the court. That's it. This was not our timing at all. But I think it's really important that when this was first brought up, you did have a number of members of this body that said exactly what you're hearing today. This is not new, but we did not bring this fight. We did not bring this up. We brought this up because you've got Democrats who were not happy enough to have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They wanted to make sure that they had total control of the courts as well.
A follow-up on what she asked. Has there been discussion with the Senate about this? Because, I mean, is it going to get through a Democrat-controlled Senate?
Yeah, first I would underline what Bill said, and that is that I have had conversations with Democratic members in the last Congress. And those conversations were maturing, and I thought we were getting to a point where this could become a bipartisan bill. The nomination of Justice Brown Jackson, though, I think created quite a political conversation. It made it, frankly, more difficult to talk about reform of the Supreme Court in a conceptual way. And as far as the Senate, I have had some conversations with some Senate members. Their sense is, listen, if you guys can get your act together in the House, then we'll take a serious look at it in the Senate.
Thank you all very much for coming.
Good spot here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and you're Beth Van Dyne, correct?
Yes, thank you for saying it correctly.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just heard from the minute there. So I'm with Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne. We're going to talk about the Born Alive bill, which is expected to pass the House today. I'm wondering, why is this bill needed right now? What are your views on it?
Last session, what you saw was nearly every single Democrat voted in support of having abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. I think what we're trying to do is set the tables right again, let it be known where we do stand on abortion, where we stand on life. And I think it's the timeliness of finally getting into the majority to be able to have something like this pass after seeing some of the monstrous bills that passed last Congress. I think it's important for the American people that they recognize that we actually do appreciate and do focus on life.
And I read a little bit of it. From my understanding, I think there's concessions, or there's a woman who is a victim of this would be able to have relief if she chose to get law enforcement involved. Why do you think that aspect is needed?
I think we're trying to give women a voice. Too often they don't have a voice in this, and if they do feel threatened in any way, they should be able to have a consequence and have an ability to be able to go and seek protection and to seek support.
Okay, and then last question for you. Democrats often argue, and maybe even those who are Republicans who maybe don't support the pro-life movement would argue that this is an extreme measure by Republicans. What would your response be to that?
I'd say that the last Congress we saw the most extreme nature of Democrats. When you agree to the abortion of a baby up until the moment of birth, that's extreme. What we're saying is let's set the expectations that we do support life, that we do value life. And when we're looking at the monstrous nature of bills that were passed this last Congress, that is a right that we're trying to, that's a wrong that we're trying to right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Up there. Thank you. Very well done. Yeah. Oh, for sure. You bet.
Are you with the congresswoman here? Or?
No, I'm
okay.
with Dusty.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, we actually live stream it. I was telling her earlier.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Did you want to share about the Born Alive bill? Do you have a
sure.
moment? Okay,
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Because we're covering this today. I'm sure it'll pass later,
Yeah,
right? So why do you think this bill is needed, or would you say is needed right now? I would assume you support it.
Absolutely, I support this bill. It's incredibly important. The idea that we would have a child that would, because of a botched abortion, be born alive, and then they would not receive proper medical care is soul-crushing. And across America, there are all kinds of people who, even if they believe in abortion rights, they know that that baby is deserving of medical care. That's what the Republican House is going to say with a clear voice today, that that is a human being that is worthy of protection and worthy of the appropriate medical care.
What do you think are some of the strongest aspects of this bill? I know I read a portion of it that allows women to have relief if they are victims of this. What do you think is some of the strongest aspects of it?
I do think this is an incredibly well-considered bill. I mean, as you mentioned, this is not just a messaging bill. This is something that is thoughtful, it's deliberate, it tries to make sure that we have the appropriate resources to mothers who need additional care, and of course, it also makes sure that we're going to provide appropriate medical care to the child that was born.
And then last question for you. What would you say to the argument that this is an extreme move by Republicans? We've heard that same messaging during last Congress from every level of Democrat, painting you all as an extremist party. What would you respond to that?
So let's remember the facts that we're talking about here. A child has been born alive. Its heart is beating. Its eyes are blinking. It has breath. It is there in a medical facility with medical professionals who can save its life. Taking care of that baby is not extreme. It is basic human dignity.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Absolutely.
Very well said.
Yeah, thanks.